to sort of footnote something that you said. As I was listening to what you said, I suddenly went, but wait a minute, and I answered my own question. So some of you may have. It's like, wait a minute, what about Todd McFarlane? Wait a minute, what about Rob Liefeld? What about the guys who seem to be making a paradigm shift? They didn't let anybody tell them, but actually, if you ever speak to those guys, they are very astute businessmen. And any risks they took and anything different or totally off the beaten path they seem to be doing is a very calculated move. It was, that was sort of, if you ever talk to or read interviews with those guys, they definitely were risk takers and were dedicated and obsessed, but they saw themselves in a certain tradition. I think Ted McFarlane saw himself coming out of Ditko and out of Michael Golden, and all with the idea of how can I get work, how can I, get more than one job, how can I expand the horizons of the genre.
I don't know if I necessarily agree with the notion that if people say you suck, that automatically there's a chance that you suck, because it's also, there's always going to be naysayers. Always. It's impossible to make everybody happy. At the very first screening of the very first Star Wars film, like 1977, Brian De Palma told George Lucas that this was the worst piece of crap he'd ever seen. He just tore it to shreds. He said, I don't understand. Who are these tin guys walking around like from the Wizard of Oz? And what's with the furry thing? And what's the sports thing? What the hell are you doing? This is garbage. Brian De Palma said it sucked. And it kind of didn't. And there's always, there's such a reflex among readers, audience, to denigrate that, any announcement is always greeted by, and Robert Downey Jr. is going to be playing Anthony Starr. That's going to suck! Well, no. Robert Downey Jr. is one of the best actors of our generation, and he's going to be fantastic, at least based on what I've seen from the trailers. But there's always this reflex, and the it's going to suck. My favorite it's going to suck anecdote was that I was at a convention some years back in the early 90s, and I was on a panel, not unlike this one, and the announcement had just been made that Tim Burton had cast Michael Keaton as Bruce Wayne in the upcoming Batman movie. And the panel was asked, what is your reaction? And the other three guys on the panel said it's going to suck. It's going to suck, it's going to be terrible, it's an insult, it's the 1960s Adam West Batman, this and the other thing. And they get to me and I said, look, Tim Burton is a director. Michael Keaton is an actor. Just because they're primarily known for comedy doesn't mean that they can't do a good dramatic take on Batman, and I'm going to wait to see the movie before I pass judgment. It is the only time I have nearly been booed off of a panel. The audience just erupted. It was like a lynch mob mentality. No support did I get from my peers who looked at me like I had just farted in church. So, flash forward 2 years, I'm at another convention, and I hear some fans saying, hey, did you hear there's going to be a Batman Returns? Yeah, well, it better have Tim Burton directing and Michael Keaton starring, because if it doesn't, it's going to suck. And I'm thank you! So,
let me clarify what he was saying. On an individual level, you gotta consider the source. But as a sampling, if most people say you got what it takes, you like how it's changed a little bit. If most people say it, then you're on the right path.
But Madeleine L'Engle's book, A Wrinkle in Time, was rejected by 23 publishers, and all of whom said it sucked, and was only accepted by one particular publisher who was an old friend of Madeleine L'Engle's and felt incredibly sorry for her. It went on to win the Newbery Award, is a classic of children's literature, and 23 publishers are kind of going, don't! So, sometimes,
How do you know? How do you know when you're a crazy person or when you're really good and have something to say?
If somebody's buying it. Okay. No, really. That's that is the measure. There will be sometimes. I think of poor John Kennedy Toole. Do you know who that is? You know? John Kennedy Toole wrote a book. No, I'm not making the name up. John Kennedy Toole wrote a book that was rejected by everybody. And he was so devastated by it. He was so convinced by the incredible rejection of this book that he committed suicide. Killed himself. Couldn't take it. His mother brought it to the attention of, and I forget who it was, a very famous author. What?
Louisiana State University Press.
Louisiana State University Press got it, but they only got it because she brought to the attention of a famous author who I'm forgetting who it was. Let's say Norman Mailer, to drop a name in. She brought to Norman Mailer's attention. He read it. He got it. He loved it. It went to Louisiana State Press and was published. The title was A Confederacy of Dunces. And it's one of the most brilliant works of literature.
So killing himself turned out to be a great marketing career.
Well, that's what Michael.
How do you follow that up?
Yeah. When Elvis Presley died, and the news got out that Elvis Presley died, Michael O'Donoghue of Saturday Night Live heard that, and the first thing he said was, "Good career move." But yeah, sometimes. I mean, look, the best story about this, J. Michael Straczynski, Joe Straczynski, was trying to make the transition from reporter to writer, to novelist, to fiction writer. And he wasn't getting anywhere. Okay? So he decided to call Harlan Ellison, who he had never met, but he knew how to get in touch with him. So he calls him, and Harlan answered the phone the way Harlan always answers the phone, which is, "Yeah!" You'd be amazed how that cuts through a lot of people. They just hang up terrified. And Joe said to him, "Yeah, Mr. Ellison, my name is Joe Straczynski, and I'm a reporter, but I'm trying to make the transition into fiction writing, and I'm having trouble. I'm not managing to sell anything, and I was hoping you might be able to offer some advice." And Harlan said, "All right, I will tell you exactly what's wrong with your work." Keep in mind, he'd never heard of him, never read it. He said, "I will tell you what's wrong with your work. It sucks. Okay? It sucks. When your work stops sucking, then it will sell. Okay?" And Joe said, "Okay." And Harlan said, "Good," and hung up. Okay? Same principle. If your work sells eventually to someone, there's a certain amount of not suckage there. But you got to just, you have to be willing to listen to people who have constructive criticism. On the other hand, you also have to be, willing to go to your inner muse and say, "No, this is what I believe. This is the style that best expresses me." And maybe you'll find your audience. You never will.
Do you think that applies to comic book art, though? I understand with the writing, you have to think outside the box. You have to fight the trend, so to speak.
Right.
So
I think
as an artist,
it's sort of a somewhere in the middle, in my opinion. I mean, as an artist, you really have two central jobs. The first is to tell the story as clearly as you can. If you're accomplishing that, then you can really focus on number two, which is to entertain. And if your art is sort of all over the map, and you got characters breaking out of panels all over the place, it's too jumbled of a mess. It's too difficult to read.
Sure.
And so it becomes. But a lot of people think that's great because it's nice and flashy, and it's great for 3 pages until you realize you have no idea what's going on.
Well, we had to beat that out with McFarlane.
Yeah.
I mean, when McFarlane, it's referred to as the big dice period, because when McFarlane first started on Hulk, he had just come off Infinity Inc. And on Infinity Inc., he had the storytelling technique of a crazed weasel, and he hid the fact that his storytelling sucked by having like giant dice, and that kind of thing, just this bizarre storytelling stuff. And when he started on Hulk, the first thing that Bob Harris did was sit him down and say, "Okay, this is a panel. This is a panel. When you put all the panels on a page in sequence, that's storytelling. That's what you're going to have to do from now on, because the big dice approach, which is okay at DC, ain't going to fly at Marvel." And and Bob Harris kind of like beat all that giant dice stuff out of McFarlane and turned him into a fairly decent storyteller who eventually went on to oblivion.